The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hello. Hi. So, on behalf of the Center of Civic Engagement here at New England College, it is my pleasure to introduce you to presidential candidate and United States Senator Amy Klubachar. Amy is the first woman to be elected to the United States Senate in Minnesota's history, and she has a well-known reputation of getting things done while she's there. A recent study has actually ranked her the most effective Democratic senator in the last United States Congress. She is committed to improving the lives of families in the heartland, ensuring that kids that grow up in rural America can stay in rural America. And without spreading lies or spreading the blame, Amy is focused on getting things done and making sure families' lives are improved every day. When she first came to Congress, her number one ask was to be on the Senate Agricultural Committee. And she understands that this country has to do more to support our beginning farmers, funding for rural energy programs, and conservation. She's also fighting for issues we all care about here in New Hampshire as well. Infrastructure, healthcare, our public schools, mental health and addiction. She understands the challenges and opportunities we face here and is taking action to make a real difference for our families. And best of all, we all know she can bring Democrats up and down the ballot with her. She has won every congressional district in Minnesota in all three of her statewide elections. And last year, she won 42 of the rural counties that Trump won in 2016. With Amy at the top of the ticket, Minnesota Democrats took back the House, flipped 2 congressional seats, and won every statewide election. And now, Amy is fighting for every American. So please, help me give a warm welcome to the senior senator from Minnesota and candidate for the presidency of the United States, Amy Klubachar.
Wow, what do you got here? Oh, yes. There we go. There we go. Look at that. NEC programs. Thank you. Good time to be named the Pilgrims, I guess. Yeah, okay. All right, well, I'm going to maybe put this right over here. Thank you. And I want to thank, first of all, Trevor so much. He's actually a fellow with our office, which he didn't add in his introduction, but we really have appreciated his work while he is a student here. And so thank you for that. And then also, where's Wayne, who helped put this together? Thank you so much. Thank you for watching that whole debate 2 days ago. I appreciate that. And then Scott Merrick right over here is our state director, and we're proud of his work too. So this is actually my first big event since the debate. So we were in New York yesterday and did some things in New York, but it's great to be back in New Hampshire. But we learned a little bit from the last time when after that debate in Columbus, we literally got on a plane. I'd had 3 hours sleep, and we came to New Hampshire and did 10 counties in 30 hours. That was a great plan, Scott. But this time, we're trying to do it a little differently, and it is so fun to be here and see all the good work you're doing. And especially, I know with Thanksgiving break coming up, that there's teachers and students. Thank you for coming in this rainy day, and what a great crowd we have here. I love this state. Minnesota and New Hampshire have a lot in common. We both have a lot of lakes and forests. You maybe have mountains that we don't have. But we have one really cool thing in common, and that is that we're only a handful of states that had the wisdom to send not one, but 2 women to the U.S. Senate. And Jeannie and Maggie are actually some of my best friends in the Senate. A few of you have heard this before, but Maggie and I compete for the New York Times mini crossword puzzle every morning. And when she gets a really good time, sometimes I see an email from her telling me she got it done in 28 seconds before I actually see the puzzle. So that's, but she is an incredible person. And it's very interesting. You have the only 2 women, the first 2 women in the history of the United States out of New Hampshire that served as both governor and senator. And Jean, who I think you all know is up for election this time, and I go way back. I actually, when she first I got to know her when she was campaigning nationally for various presidential candidates, and we've stayed at their house on vacation with our family. But I actually, one of my most fond memories of Jean is I was sitting next to her when she first got to the Senate. And she said to me, we were talking about these desks, the old desks. And in fact, Senator Sherrod Brown just wrote a book, and I've just started reading it. It's so good. It's about his desk in the Senate. It's called Desk 88. And it is about the people that had that desk. So I told Jean the story how I had requested when I got to the U.S. Senate, Hubert Humphrey's desk. And she said, oh, really? Well, how do you know whose desk it is? I said, well, they sign it. I said, but here's what happened to me. I asked for it. In a few months, they all look alike, right? The desk gets there. I'm all excited. I open it up, and it says Gordon Humphrey from New Hampshire. They had given me the wrong desk. But even by that time in the Senate, I had learned that you pick your battles. And so I actually just decided, well, I guess so. I'll read up on Gordon Humphrey. And so I was telling Jean that story, and then she said, well, let me look at it. I said, okay. So I opened up the desk, and what I didn't know when the new Congress had arrived, which of course included her, they had changed out my desk, and I then had and still have Hubert Humphrey's desk, which is a great thing. And he was this incredible happy warrior. I have his picture in our front office. And it's a reminder to me, and maybe to all of you, that no matter how hard things get, as they were this week with that impeachment hearing, and thinking of those public servants, of that Fiona Hill yesterday. Oh my God. And it was, I read somewhere this week, this strong women's leadership that you could see on display with Fiona Hill as well as Ambassador Yovanovitch, who I personally know. But mostly it was their words, and Lieutenant Colonel Vinneman, when he told that story of how his immigrant dad had brought their family, had come over here, and he was talking to his dad, and he says, don't worry, this is a country where it's okay to tell the truth. And so through all of this week, and I'll get to this in a minute, I think it is really important to remember that there's a lot of good people that are standing up for America, including those ones that testified this week, that believe in what my friend John McCain always used to say, that there's nothing more liberating than a cause greater than yourself. And that's what they did this week when they testified. And I think that it's also good to remember that there's a whole lot of citizens out there who, when you look in this next election and you put it in this context, that for them, this election, yes, it's an economic check, and I'm sure we'll have some good discussions today about that and policies like you saw us debate this week, but it is also a patriotism check. It's a values check on this president as they go into this election. When you look at those people that had previously voted for Donald Trump and then voted for the new governor of Kentucky so that Mitch McConnell now has a Democratic governor, or you look at what happened in Virginia, where we again put up this slate of very diverse candidates all over that state, and we switched both the House and the Senate. Something is going on. So my message to you right here from the start is very profound. We can't screw this up. Okay, we can't, because we have this opportunity to put together this team across the country that believes truly in their hearts that what unites us is bigger than what divides us. A group of people that is bigger than Donald Trump, that is bigger than any of those people that show up at his rallies and yell mean things. It's much bigger than that. It really gets to the heart of America. And if we want to move on these big ticket items like immigration reform and climate change and finally doing something about college affordability, since we're at this great college, and do something when it comes to health care and bringing the costs down, we cannot eke by a victory at 4 a.m. with one state, even if it's New Hampshire. We can't do that. We have to win big, and we have to win across the country so that people are going to be able to sit across each other at a Thanksgiving table again and talk and not just get mad at each other. Because this president has really fueled these divides. He does it all the time. He goes after immigrants, treats them like political pawns. He goes after people of color. He goes after people that don't agree with him. He literally makes mincemeat of our democracy and allows others to make mincemeat of our democracy. And when you think of this patriotism, that at its core, the state knows a lot about that. You produce a lot of incredible veterans through the years. You've produced ambassadors. You have given us some incredible political leaders, including the ones you have in Congress right now, that have always seen their roles as just a little bit bigger than what they have to do for their own neighborhood. They've seen a bigger neighborhood that includes our country and that includes our world. And I think that is really on display right now. I was thinking about this the other day when I thought about how Fiona Hill, after last night, how she was making this very clear that this whole theory that Ukraine was somehow trying to interfere in our elections wasn't just wrong. Okay, it's wrong. That didn't happen. We know the facts are there. We know that the FBI director and President Trump's own national security people have all said that it was Russia that did this. They've said it under oath. Every single one of them have said this, because I've been at the hearings where we asked them questions. So we know it's wrong. But what she said yesterday was so important. It's not just wrong. They're actually furthering a hoax. They're furthering something that Russia wanted us to believe and still wants us to believe that it's not true. And that gets to the patriotism piece of this. You think about the fact that thousands of people from New Hampshire have died fighting for democracy. Hundreds of thousands of Americans have died fighting for our democracy on battlefields. 4 little innocent girls died at the height of the civil rights movement at that church in Birmingham, Alabama. They just commemorated the anniversary of that tragic bombing. Those 4 little girls died as innocents because people were trying to pull back on democracy. They wouldn't extend the rights of our democracy. This has always been about a more perfect union. It never was a perfect union from the beginning. That's why they said in the Constitution, we strive for a more perfect union. And we cannot afford to go backwards. And so at its core, and when we get into all the details of all the issues that you all know important and that you are so good at in New Hampshire, my favorite New Hampshire story was this 11-year-old boy named Quinn, who I met on Easter Sunday at a church in Walpole, who came up to me during the service. Like, no, we'll talk later, Quinn. And then I met him at the social hour, and then he continues to appear at mine and, by the way, other candidates' events, and is this incredible kid. But one of the questions he asked me at an event was, when the Mueller testimony was going on, do you think it would be better for Mueller to testify in the House or Senate first, and should it be before the Intelligence or Judiciary committees? So I am well aware of the detailed knowledge of New Hampshire voters, but I think we cannot forget what its core, what this is about. I was reminded of that actually when we were in Berlin and we did an event similar to this, and I led with a whole economic sort of points about what we needed to do economically to help their town and help your state, and they've obviously had some closures up there, and I think they've heard a lot of that. And then we started doing questions, and it literally went off the rails in a really good way. It was about a month ago. Their questions were all about, how does this impeachment proceeding work? What should we do? What does it happen in the House first? What does it happen? And it was one of those moments I thought, okay, these people, a lot of them have fallen on hard times. Some of them are out of work. Some of them are retired, and there they are. But they still cared so much about this. It wasn't some gotcha moment. They were actually trying to figure it out. And if you don't believe me, one of them said to the other, well, it's kind of like the Law and Order TV show. You know, the first half, they gather the evidence, and then the second half is the court. I said, well, okay, but it's not criminal, but it is that way you think about it. It's that way. So I want us to remember this moment in time. And as I just mentioned, the only way we're going to get all this stuff done is if we win big. But let's say we win big. And what do we want to do? Well, one of the things that I've done is put out a 100-day plan, because I think it's really important, given what this president has done, that we immediately switch over to another way of thinking as citizens. And when you look at the first 100-day plan for an American president, it was FDR's. And of course, we were in the middle of an economic crisis. But he also understood the trust crisis we were in, because people didn't trust their leaders. People didn't trust business. People didn't trust their government leaders. And so that's why he thought it was so important to shake things up right away. So if you have time, you should look up at our website. We should start passing these things around. But we have found over 100 things. I think it's like at count, we add things. 130, what, Tommy? Okay, Tommy, that's really weird that you know the exact number. 136 things that we can do in the first 100 days. Some of it is proposed legislation, which I've committed to do. Some of which I've committed to very strongly get done in the first year. But a lot of the things are things that we can do without Congress. Yes. And I love Congress, and I'm going to work with Congress better, certainly than this president, and I will have a unique way of working with Congress, because I've been able to work across the aisle, passing over 100 bills myself as a lead Democrat. But we have to remember there are some things that we can get done, right away. And that includes the issue of climate change. Existential crisis of our time. This president has not only not helped us, he's gone backwards on it. California was trying to get those gas mileage standards that actually President Obama had proposed and all the car companies thought we were going to do. A bunch of those car companies working with California, including Ford, to get that done. They supported it. And the Trump administration literally stopped their state from doing what some of the car companies wanted to do, and worse, threatened them with antitrust violations for working with California to get this done. So what can we do without Congress? Number one thing on climate change we can do without Congress is get ourselves back into the International Climate Change Agreement. When the president took us out of this agreement, there were only two countries that weren't in it, and that was Nicaragua and Syria. Now they are both in the agreement. So we are the only ones. The Clean Power Rule, something that was very well negotiated over the years during the Obama administration, ended up on the cutting room floor. When the Trump administration comes in, we can bring those back. As I mentioned, the gas mileage standards. A president can do that herself without, I keep doing this, one of my messages from the debate was we have to start thinking of things differently. When I suggested we play the game, what's your favorite woman president? No, I'm kidding. So, and so it is really important that people envision this differently. So, gas mileage standards and then sweeping legislation to put a carbon price out there. I think that one of the things that's happened is people start thinking, oh, this is going to be expensive. And a carbon price will help us pay for any of the economic dislocation that I think we'll see. There'll be some forms of energy that'll be phasing out, new ones coming in. I actually don't think that'll be an even match. You can't just expect that all the green energy jobs are going to go to one place. And that's why I've suggested incentives for manufacturing of any kind and other types of jobs for the areas that will see some job changes, as well as making sure people can afford energy. And we can do this. We just have to be really smart about how we do it. I was saying the other night that I think of things with my head and also my heart. And for me, this is very important because my family came from northern Minnesota. And we have iron ore mines up there, which I've been working very hard over the years to make sure keep going, and that makes steel, right? So those are still going strong right now. But at one point when they were closing down, there was a billboard outside of Duluth that said, "Last one to leave, turn off the lights." They literally took a billboard off. And now Duluth is thriving, some because of tourism, some because of the port, some because of unique manufacturing, like those cutting boards, Epicurean, things like they make jets, they make all kinds of things. And the town was able to adapt with a town that's not a huge town, but they were able to do it. And so that's why I have hope when I see those things and believe we can make this work with climate change and the kind of changes we're going to see. Second big challenge that we have is healthcare. Have you seen the debates? A few things on that. I personally believe that the best way to get our premiums down is with a nonprofit public option. That is something that President Obama wanted to do from the beginning. It creates competition with insurance, and it's estimated that 13 million people would see their rates go down. One example with my plan is a family of 4 making $100,000 would see their premiums go down by 50%. And so I think that when we look at that, we've got to actually look at the numbers and how we get there and make sure we do no harm. Right now, the Affordable Care Act, according to the polls, is 10 points more popular than Donald Trump. It was a major reason that people voted in Kentucky because of that Republican governor having aligned himself against the Affordable Care Act and Medicaid and those kinds of things. And it made a big difference when our candidate was campaigning on the protections you get with the Affordable Care Act. So I think trashing and dismantling the Affordable Care Act is a bad idea. Secondly, pharmaceutical prices have skyrocketed. Common drugs like insulin and things that like EpiPen. Remember what happened with that? That was personal for me because my daughter has allergies to certain nuts. She carries an EpiPen with her everywhere. So I had a good sense of the prices. I also had a sense that you never have one EpiPen because you got to have one at school and one at home and one with her, and then they get old and then they lose one, and it's really a whole thing. And so when those went up, skyrocketed, I personally took that on along with a number of other parents. I was in the U.S. Senate, put me in a good position to do it, but we literally waged a public relations and social media campaign, and they had to bring that down with coupons and other things. But not every parent is going to be able to do that for every drug. And that's why I favor the kind of competition that you get when you bring in less expensive drugs from other countries. That would make a huge difference. In my state, we can see Canada from our porch. So we see those prices right there. As well as doing more when it comes to unleashing the power of 43 million seniors to negotiate under Medicare. That would make a big difference. We have other healthcare issues that maybe we can get to in the Q&A that I am just sort of, I think it's more important that we be focusing on some of these other things if you want to look to the future. Mental health, 1 in 5 Americans struggle with mental health sometime in their life. And yet, I don't think the word has hardly come up on the debate stage, except maybe I said it once and maybe someone else did. But I think that would be a really good discussion for our country to have. Addiction. This is personal for me because my dad struggled with alcoholism my whole life growing up. By the time John and I got married, he had 3 DWIs when he was given a choice, treatment or jail. And he picked treatment, and it changed his life. And since then, he has been sober after struggling before with treatment when it didn't work. So I kind of saw that effect of tough love, but I also saw how it changed his life and our life. And he is now 91 and in assisted living. And as he said to me a year ago, when his AA group was visiting, it's hard to get a drink around here anyway. But it is, his life's changed. And I think other people should have that same right to be pursued by grace. College, since we're right here in a college, I believe we should be putting our money into the futures of our kids, and that we should be focusing on people that need it the most. And that includes helping kids by doubling Pell Grants. Something like 50%, is that right? 51% of the kids at this college are on Pell Grants. Remember, that's not loans. Those are actual grants. And right now, and this is for the students that are listening and their families, it's set at $6,000 a year. Imagine the difference if we doubled it to $12,000 a year. That would make a big difference. And what if we took the income level, I can see you back there liking that. What if we took the income level, which is now set at $50,000 a year, and put it at $100,000 a year? So that would then expand it to allow more families to use those grants, and to use those grants at qualified institutions, whether they be public or private. I'm picking that. I'm picking that plan because I think it helps to get the money where it should go, to historically black colleges and universities, to colleges like this. It helps the students where they are, and I think it would make the most sense. I also think we have the fastest growing job right now, our 1- and 2-year degrees. That's why I favor making those community college degrees free. But then we also know there's going to be a huge amount of jobs out there for kids that get the 4-year degrees and beyond. We've got to look at the areas where we need workers right now. So we are not going to have a shortage of CEOs. We are going to have a shortage of plumbers in this country. We're going to have 74,000 openings for electricians. We're going to have over 1 million openings for home health care workers. And we're going to have a lot of openings for the students here in those areas of technology and science and healthcare. And so the more we can create incentives for kids to use their 4-year degrees to get into areas where we know the jobs are, the better off we're going to be. And that's why I would tie the loan forgiveness for people, of course, that go into public service. Oh, the first thing I do is get rid of Betsy DeVos. That's a cheap DeVos line. But because she has really messed up this program for the loan payment. It's this 10-year program. But you could actually expand this program to include these in-demand jobs. And then for everyone else, of course, you would be able to reduce the interest rate for loan payments. I figure if multimillionaires can refinance their yachts, students should be able to refinance their loans. So that is my plan. And I realize there are other plans out there worth considering. I am very concerned about free college for all. As you know, that is not free college for all. It's focused on the public schools, which is my plan would cover in a big way. But it also would mean that wealthy kids would get free college too. And something like 10% of the kids at those public colleges are from families that make over $200,000 a year. So it is not actually as small a percentage as you think. And I know it sounds good on a bumper sticker. And as I said at the debate, I'm not for something just because it looks good on a bumper sticker, and I'm not going to throw a free car into, which I know might not be a popular thing to say with students, but I think students are really smart. And I give them the credibility to be able to see through this, because we have to make sure we're not putting more debt on the shoulders of our kids, because that's what we're doing right now. The world we're leaving our kids right now, man, a world that the climate is changing, and it's the students of this country, this generation, thank God, that's standing up and saying, no, we're not going to take this. It is the students of this country that would inherit this ever-escalating debt that President Trump is letting get worse and worse on a daily basis, including with his tax bill, which added over $1 trillion in debt. I did not vote for it. I wasn't close to voting for it. And when he went down to Mar-a-Lago and told his wealthy friends, you just got a lot richer, I think that told us all where his heart is and what happened with that tax bill. And so the debt, the climate, gun safety, what we're seeing with gun violence, and we just saw again at another high school, that's what's happening right now. And I guess I'll end with this, because I think one of the most amazing things right now is the way young people are standing up like never before. For me, it started the day after the inauguration. And by the way, I've always, when I first started campaigning for Senate, I remember going to the University of Minnesota with a big blown up check of student loan interest rates and how much it was, and like 3 students go, hey, yeah. There has been a marked change over the last decade with student involvement. That it's not just politicians saying, we got to get young people. It's young people leading the way. It was young people that led the way, really, to get the political movement to get gay marriage. That happened. It was young people. It was young people that led the way when Barack Obama was just when everyone was saying, how could someone with a name we've never heard of be able to be president? It was young people. By the way, I like weird names for president. I think that's a good thing. It was young people. And it is these causes of climate change and gun safety and college affordability where young people are leading the way again. You saw it in the midterm elections where they voted at higher levels than they had before, but most significantly, you also saw it in the after Parkland, where those kids stood up in Florida, and then those kids motivated other kids, and they started talking to their dads and their grandpas, and then that led in hunting families, and that led to the election of some incredible new members of Congress. And those members of Congress are the ones that pass universal background check and all of those bills that are now sitting in a stack on Mitch McConnell's desk. So I really go around to where I started, which is if we want to get these things done, we can't just win by a little. We have to win big. And we have to be the kind of country where we can have civil disagreements, but know that what unites us is bigger than what divides us. And I think I'll just end, since I'm at this college, reminding us of where we started from. The day after the inauguration, we had millions of people march all over this country peacefully in record numbers that we'd never seen before. The day after that, 6,000 women signed up to run for office. That happened. On day 9, when that anti-Muslim order came out, that refugee ban, people spontaneously showed up at airports all over this country. Who does that on a Saturday night? But people did that. Day 100, my favorite march, the March for Science. My favorite sign, what do we want? Science. When do we want it? After peer review. Into the summer, when the Republicans were trying to repeal the Affordable Care Act, and all at the time 48 fighting Democrats stood together, from Bernie to Joe Manchin, and we said no. Because we stood together, we were joined by 3 Republicans, including Senator McCain, who said no. And we won that effort. They did not kick people off of their health insurance. We did that. You go into that following summer, when the first glimmers of hope since Donald Trump's election, and into the fall, when these legislative races were up. My personal favorite was a guy from New Jersey who had said the day of the Women's March, I hope they'll be home in time to make dinner. That guy got defeated by an African-American woman. That happened. And then you go to Parkland and the young people, and what happened there, where they just said, no, we're not going to take it, and they started marching and kept that march going into that last congressional election, where literally we took the House of Representatives and turned it into the People's House again. Then we had what happened these last few weeks. I mean, it is an exciting thing to be a part of, because we are literally reclaiming our democracy right in front of our eyes. So anyone that thinks this is a time to just stay home because you get mad about Donald Trump's tweets, don't do that. You can be part of something much bigger. So I hope for those of you who are committed to our campaign, thank you. For those of you who are just thinking about it because you live in New Hampshire and it's considered a positive when someone comes up to you and said, you are now in my top 3. If you are one of those people, commit today. Commit today. And let me tell you why. We are on the rise. We are on the rise. Since the debate before then, we raised money in record numbers. I think we raised $2.1 million in 6 days online from regular people. We have gone up in the polls, doubled here, doubled there, and I know that I'm now, I think, 5 in a number of these polls nationally. Okay, 6, thank you. See what I mean? Yeah. Okay, in Iowa I'm 5. So there. But we are going up. And this is an electorate where I think something like, depending on where you are, 60 to 70% of the people actually haven't made a decision yet. Why? Because they want to make sure, what I said at the beginning, we don't screw this up. They want to make sure that we have someone at the top of the ticket that can actually win. And the way I look at it is this. We have this incredibly inspired base of people that started marching the day after the inauguration. And they have organized and they have voted in record levels ever since then. But we also have to bring in those people that stayed home. We've got to bring in or voted for Donald Trump. 10% of the people that voted him, that's sort of a rough estimate, voted for Barack Obama. Those people are out there. And they are people like the guy in a closed down factory that I met who showed me this. It was a coat rack that had the 18 uniforms of the people that used to work there that got messed up because of the trade war and other decisions with oil waivers. And he says, look, these are my friends. I'm the last worker working here because my job is just to maintain the equipment. But I've kept all these uniforms on this coat rack. They said Derek and Salvador. And he says, I've kept these names and these uniforms because maybe they can come back. Or it was this other guy I met in my state, and this was about a year and a half ago, who told me after the media left, he says, we made a mistake. And I thought he meant like, it was something I did. I was like, okay. But he was talking about himself as we, because he didn't feel comfortable saying I. He says, we made a mistake. I was mad, and we voted for Donald Trump. And then he said, and then I saw that right after that inauguration, the CIA wall. And that was when Trump had stood in front of the wall, probably not the first thing on your mind, but it was on his, with all the stars of the anonymous patriots who had died in their line of duty. And he gave a political speech in front of that wall. Then he said, I was a Boy Scout. And when he gave the Boy Scout speech, another political speech to a bunch of young people, he says, that was it. And he started to cry and he said, I am never doing that again. Never. Then there was a guy in New Hampshire in a line, and it was an event where for some reason everyone was wearing these stickers you've probably seen. I'm a Supreme Court voter. And one of them said, I'm a climate change voter. And this guy comes up and he's just wearing a brown jacket. And I, for a joke, said, you're not wearing a sticker. And he said, yeah, because I voted for Donald Trump. I was a Donald Trump voter, but they don't know. Because he knew some of the people there. Don't tell them. And I'm like, okay, I won't tell them. And he goes, but I'm not doing it again. So I want us to remember this. It's not just about the campaign. It's really about how we're going to govern. And it's about being able to look at people in the eye so he can talk about it and why he did and why he's not doing it this time so we get our country back again. That's why I am running for president, and that's why I ask for your support. Thank you. Okay. Very good. You're back, Trevor. You're back. Thank you, guys. Okay, we got questions. Okay. Oh, Jordan. Where's Jordan? Somewhere? Jordan? Oh, you're hiding. That's why we do cards. Oh, okay. Do you want to ask your question yourself, or do you want me to read it? Okay. Now you see why you didn't want to ask it, because there's a big microphone in your face now. So your question was about mental health. And as I explained to you, one of the reasons it's so personal for me is I saw my own dad struggle with alcoholism. But another reason it's personal is actually there was a senator from Minnesota named Paul Wellstone who really took this on. His buttons were green. It's one of the reasons mine are. He's tragically died in a plane crash, way too young. But his brother had schizophrenia. And he always talked about how their house was dark. His brother's name is Stephen. And their house was dark because they didn't want to tell anyone about it. After a while, they realized that was stopping them from getting help. For their son and for their brother, and they finally did. And I've met Paul's brother a few times, and that changed his life. And so when he got to the Senate, he started working with Senator Kennedy, and with a Republican congressman who used to be from my state named Jim Remstead on mental health parity. And that's something that Patrick Kennedy has now taken on. And that is this idea that if you're going to have insurance coverage for physical illness, it should also cover mental illness. And so that law actually passed, but there's still been problems with implementing it and getting the rules. And I know as president, in Paul's name, I will get this done. And I actually took on eating disorders, which is, this is a really interesting, weird, sad fact. That is actually the #1 cause of death of any mental illness for women, is eating disorders. And so that was one that wasn't covered at all. And so we worked, I got 3 women on the bill with me, 2 Republicans and me and another Democrat, and that had been sitting there for 20 years, and we actually got that bill passed a few years ago. And that has made a big difference because it means that residential eating disorder treatment can be covered. So that's the first thing, and that mostly helps for people with insurance, that the more we can do to get this covered, the better off we will be. The second thing we need to do is to make sure that there are enough public health beds. And there aren't in this country right now. We went smartly from those state hospitals to community-based mental health care, but we didn't really figure out what we were going to do when there were more severe cases. And there are a lot of severe cases right now. If you don't believe me, there has been a 30% increase in suicides in the United States of America in 15 years. 30% increase. So when you read these stories in the paper or you hear about someone from school or someone you know, this is really happening right now. And some of it is that people are isolated. They're, in their phones looking down. Some of it is because they are feeling just that there's no one there for them. And so all of this means we have to step back and look at what's going on. It's especially high with youth, LGBTQ youth, especially high with people in rural areas, and especially high with veterans, actually. There have been really horrific suicides in VA parking lots in the last year. So the answers are, first of all, of course, prevention, having more counselors in school, having more healthcare available, particularly in healthcare deserts, which is rural areas where it's harder to get places. The second thing is making sure that when people are at a point where they can work again, making sure that we as a society understand that they should be in the workforce, and we should figure out a way to get them jobs, especially in states like yours and actually mine that have low unemployment rates. We are in a better place to be able to do that. There's things about hospitals and waivers that we can do to make it better, so that would be a big part of it. And I think part of this is going to be back to what I was talking about before. It's changing the tone of our politics, changing our civic culture so we can talk to each other and look at these things again. This president has not helped on that front. When I was in a small town in Iowa, there was a school counselor there from a high school of 650 kids. I think it was middle and high school. She said during that day, she'd had 4 kids visit her that had thoughts of suicide. In one day, in a school that, she said they were all immigrant kids. And they were all afraid that their parents were going to be deported every day and they couldn't handle it anymore. They thought, understandably, their whole life was going to go away. All their parents were working at a factory nearby. So this kind of discord and this kind of actual fear, it's not just made up in people's heads, it's real. If they're that afraid, or they're afraid they're going to be bullied, or they're afraid that their parents are going to be taken away from them, or they're going to be taken away and their whole life is going to be taken away, which is why I get to bringing back some sanity into our policies, domestic and foreign, and bringing back some consistency and getting to a point where you're not afraid to turn on TV and see the president. For some of these people, they're actually afraid, for good reason, that what he says is going to destroy their lives. So I think it's going to be all of our country working together, but it's certainly got to start from the top when we talk about how we're going to make this a better place to live in. All right? Okay, next. Here we go. Let's see. Okay. Oh, it's another mental illness, which we did. Ooh, come back, Trevor. Yeah. Yeah, I think we answered that one. Okay. let's see. College and student loan debt. I think I pretty much talked about that, but I just want people to know how I take this very seriously. Just so you know my background, I'm the granddaughter of an iron ore miner that couldn't actually graduate from high school and almost not even middle school because his parents were sick, and he had to work and support 9 brothers and sisters. He actually went to work as a Teamster. I heard there's some Teamsters here. Is that right? Somewhere? Yeah. So that was his first job. He pulled a wagon, and he was, I think, 14, some 15, 16. And then he went to work in the mines, underground mines, his whole life. But what he did do was save money in a basement in the coffee can to send my dad to college. And my dad went to a 2-year community college, and then he got a degree from the University of Minnesota, and of course didn't have debt. My mom grew up in Milwaukee, grew up poor too. She came to Minnesota. This is a lot of union stories, because that helped her a lot. She was part of the teachers union. She taught 2nd grade until she was 70 years old. At some point in the middle, my parents got divorced, and she went back to teaching. And again, the teachers union, because she had a livable wage, helped her to support our family at that time. And all of that time, she didn't have really loans either. I went to school. I had some loans, but then I met my husband, and he had a lot of loans, but I married him anyway, like $60,000 of loans, which for some of our students right now doesn't seem like much. My husband grew up in a trailer home, 5 brothers. His parents were devoted to education, but they had 6 kids. And so I kind of will defy some of the other people that are running for president. Not everyone quite has that story. We're just a story of a family that didn't come from a lot of money, and that's why education's so important to me. I just want to be really careful about how we do this, so that when we're doing it, we don't put more debt on your shoulders, and that we also make sure, as I said, that we are connecting our education system to the jobs that we have out there. And that for those jobs that don't pay enough, but we need workers in, let's say home healthcare workers, we got to make sure that they are a livable wage. That's why I favor raising the minimum wage. But we also have to make sure there's a safety net for childcare and for work family leave and for retirement. And for a lot of young people, they are not going to work at places that automatically have a 401k or a pension. And actually, we just introduced a bill, Chris Coons, the senator from Delaware, and I did, for up savings accounts, supported by SEIU and a number of other groups. And it's a pretty interesting idea for smaller employers, and there's some funding for this. And as you know, I show how I'm going to pay for every single thing I do. And this would be 50 cents an hour extra that goes into this savings account. And you can do it for part-time jobs. You can do it for even short-term jobs, and you could take it with you, but it is kept in a savings account. One interesting thing about it, the first $2,500 you can take out every year for emergency expenses. Over half the people in this country don't have the $400 to pay for an emergency room expense or some other kind of emergency expense. And so up to a lifetime, it would give you about $600,000 that would help to supplement Social Security and those kinds of things. So not enough people are talking about retirement. You all know we're having a graying of our population, which is a great thing because people are living longer, but that means we should be planning for the workers to help people when they're growing older. We should be planning for the housing. I was at a senior center recently in New Hampshire, and we should also be planning for savings. And if we don't do that, the young people out there are going to get really screwed. And so I keep trying to make clear that we just can't appeal to people in this campaign based on their now. We have to be thinking ahead. There is an Ojibwe old saying that great leaders make decisions for this generation, but also 7 generations from now. And our problem in this country right now is we have a president that can't keep his decisions for 7 minutes from now. And we need to think for the long term. Okay. Let's see. Or maybe a tweet from now. Okay, why are you the candidate that can defeat President Trump? This is from Lee from Mount Vernon. Where are you, Lee? Oh, right there. Okay. Oh, background, sure, yes. I don't know why I'm giving you the microphone.
Yeah, that's okay. So I, new resident in New Hampshire, and I changed party affiliation. I am now a Republican identifying as a Democrat. And my biggest, my biggest concern is that left to its own devices, he's going to win. So that's why, when I look at the slate of candidates, I'm concerned. So why are you the one?
Okay, very good. Thanks for wearing my sticker, though. Okay, so first of all, I think we need to have someone that actually can win, and that's our number one thing. And you got to look at the track records of the candidates who are running. And when you look at my track record, I would submit it's the most interesting and positive one if you run any kind of predictable line for being able to bring in those votes. I would actually suggest you call anyone you know from my state. They won't all agree with me. Not everyone will have voted for you, but I think they will tell you that I have been fair and that I have respect from people in our state. And that's one of the reasons I've won in record numbers time and time again, including against a sitting congressman when I ran for U.S. Senate. And I have done that by going not just where it is comfortable, but by going where it's uncomfortable. I have gone to rural areas and spent a lot of time there. And as was noted by Trevor, I've won 42 counties that Donald Trump won. So I would start with that. The second thing I've done is one big in the suburban areas. When I first started running, our party was not doing well in suburban areas, which are very similar to suburban areas all over this country. I still remember when I was first running for the DA job, I went into one of our suburban high schools that had traditionally been Republican. And I thought, well, here I am at the Democratic meeting I was to attend, and there were 6 guys. They looked kind of sad, and they were sitting in a little room. And I said, well, I'm here. And they said, Amy, this is the Winter Golf Club of Minnetonka, and the Democrats are around the corner. And I went around the corner, and there were 250 Democrats. I'm like, wow. And so that is how things change. And many of them were moderate Republicans who had, say, voted for one of our former governors, Arnie Carlson. They were those Republicans, but they were starting to get sick even back then. They were starting to get tired of some of the rhetoric and sort of the pushing people out of the Republican Party because they didn't agree with them on certain issues. And I think you've seen that now reach a pinnacle with President Trump. And so when I look at my record, I am someone that's always brought those voters with me. And I've done it time and time again. And my state, just so you know, the northern Minnesota has steelworkers and Teamsters and kind of like a Pennsylvania, western Pennsylvania type voting group. The Iowa border and the North and South Dakota border is very rural. And then there is in the middle the exurban rural district of Michelle Bachmann. And I have won every one of those Republican districts 3 times in a row now, congressional districts. They are a whole congressional district, and I've done it by getting there. And this last election, we actually took, when I led the ticket, for the 3rd time, we flipped the Republican House Democratic, and we also flipped 2 of the suburban congressional seats. And what does it mean? Well, we actually have had some really smart fiscal policy in our state. One of my favorite memories, a few years ago, I was in the Senate and I looked up, and that year CNBC voted our state, just for your knowledge, the best state to do business in. And I remember I went up to Ted Cruz and say, hey, I don't know if you saw this. And so we have just brought some sanity back to our government and cohesiveness in our state. And so I think that way of being is really important if you want to bring these people in. And if you want to win in those states that Donald Trump won. Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa, Ohio. I would target those, as well as he almost won my state of Minnesota. And as I have said many times, when I've been in those states, I'm going to build a blue wall around those states and make Donald Trump pay for it. That is the plan. And so that is really the hardcore. Obviously, New Hampshire Donald Trump did not win New Hampshire. Maggie was on the ballot and it did a great job organizing people. And actually, Hillary had a healthy margin of victory compared to a state like mine, honestly. Well, I know, but that's a healthy margin of victory percentage-wise compared to Minnesota. Yeah, but it was a healthy margin of victory compared to Minnesota, which was her smallest margin of victory. Where do you work again? He won't ever say. He just shows up at all the events. And he sits in the front row and he corrects me. It's really good, though. But you're right. You're right.
And that's why the law was changed, so that it makes a harder time for these college students who are out of state to vote.
Yeah.
Less than 3,000, there's 5,400 out-of-state voters, but we don't know how many are voting.
Okay, I've now established that you're not a Republican tracker. This is good. That's good, good, good. Okay, no, no, it's all good. It's all good. He and I have had a lot of discussion. We're all good. We're all good. We're all good. Okay, I was wrong and you were right. No. Yeah, no, you're right. So, and that is why, oh, thank you. Well, rather than you and me debating, it's good. Yes. Okay, next, yeah. Uh-huh.
Platform is to overturn Roe v. Wade. I never heard you say anything
Okay,
about
well,
abortion
sure.
rights, Planned Parenthood, access. I didn't hear a word, and I'm waiting and waiting.
Okay. Well, I think probably because I just talked about it on the debate stage. So it was, I had just made a big point of it, and I try to talk about it whenever I can, and maybe there was going to be a question. So I do try to talk about it, and it's incredibly important in this state. And in fact, Jean Shaheen has been a major leader on this and would remind me of this every day. I have always been pro-choice. I would codify Roe v. Wade as president. I am someone that would actually fund Planned Parenthood. And as I pointed out on the debate stage, over 90% of Americans support contraception and funding for contraception. Over 70% of them support Roe v. Wade. And what this president has done, we were in Georgia for that debate, is completely at odds with where the vast majority of American people are. When he was running for president, he actually said that he would, it was on an interview with Chris Matthews, and he implied that he thought women should go to jail for exercising their right to choose. Then they dialed it back later that day and said, no, doctors should maybe go to jail. Well, that's what they've done with some of these laws. Alabama is a 99-year sentence, a 99-year sentence. Georgia is they're laws that are meant to make it so that there is no right to choose. So to get back to his question, this is going to be a major deciding issue, including for some moderate Republicans out there and independents. Because when you look at the judges he's put on the court, when you look at the kind of laws that he is allowing and leading to be passed, they are inimical to where so many Americans stand. I would also reverse the gag rules, both domestic and global. And I am someone that, interestingly enough, while I have these strong views and work with Jeannie all the time, since she's one of the leaders in the Senate on this issue, I've also been the leader of the Adoption Caucus, which I head up. And these two things aren't inimical. They're not against each other in any way. And this administration, this is what's really weird. It's a lot of focus is on international adoption. They have actually done nothing to make this easier on families who want to adopt kids. And it's something I'd also take on at the same time. So that's where I am. I hope that answers it. Okay, should we take one more of these here? Okay. Let's see. Well, we talked about climate change. I'm going to try to get something else. Let's see. Oh, what's your vision to help Americans? I'm going to go through all these in a rapid order. Here we go. To allow Americans to live independently. I think a lot of this is housing and making sure that we have housing credits, making sure we have incentives for people that want to live in their homes, which we actually haven't done enough of, and I think there's more we can do there. In addition to rejoining the Paris Accord and the power plan, what more radical plans do you have to combat climate change? That's an interesting word. Okay. So, as I said, we have to put a price on carbon. I just don't want to make you stand here with this thing. We can put a price on carbon. I think that would make a big difference. Is that your question? Yeah, okay. But we can put a price on carbon, and we can do that 3 ways. We can do it with a tax. We can do it with doing it with a cap and trade, which we passed once in the House of Representatives, or we can do it with a renewable electricity standard. And I would work with Congress on what's the best way to do it. Yep.
Tom Steyer came to our town a few months ago and talked about an issue that resonated with me for a long time, and I think is a bipartisan issue, which is the issue of public funded elections and the corruption of our election process, returning the government for the people and by the people. And of course, Citizens United is part of that, but it goes way beyond that. I think our election process has turned into a 4-year election process, which is exhausting and non-productive. And you look at countries like England, where it's a 6-week maximum, which maybe is the other extreme. But it's just politics has turned into a big money reality show.
Okay, very good. I'm just trying to take a deep breath because he's got a lot of money that I wish I had to pay for my TV ads. And he's done some great work on climate change. But I would start with that because I just don't think that you should be able to have billionaires have an unfair advantage in this election. And I don't. And so everyone has a right to run, but the issue is you want to have the best candidate that can win and beat Donald Trump. And so when I look at this, I don't think people look and say, okay, Donald Trump's a multimillionaire. I want to have someone richer that can beat him. I actually think whoever our candidate is, that we're going to be able to get the funding to more than match Donald Trump, because you've seen that with a number of these races all across the country, because there are so many people interested in helping. I would prefer public finance, which I think he supports as well. I think public finance would be a solution. It's not a solution we have right now. In my state, it works really well, and we should expand it in a much bigger way on the federal level for things like Senate races and House races. I think it would make a difference. Secondly, I think that getting rid of all this voter suppression would be the best thing we could ever do. I have long led the bill to register every kid when they turn 18 to vote. That would actually, when you get at some of these bad things that have happened in New Hampshire and across the country, that would add 20 million people to the voter rolls, legally registered. Because when I was just down in Georgia, Corey and Pete and I sat there and did texts to voters. They are literally contacting 1 million people who are going to be purged off the voter rolls because they just haven't voted in the last few elections. Think about that and how outrageous that is. I have a bill to change that as well. Gerrymandering is very unfair. Both New Hampshire and my state have high voter turnouts, but that is not true. And you've got to make it easier and easier for people to vote, not harder for them to vote. Getting the money out of politics is, of course, not just about public finance. It is also about Citizens United. I would lead, and I feel this in my heart. Perhaps you heard me on the debate stage say at one time I was so hard up for raising money that I raised $17,000 from ex-boyfriends. That's a true story. I called everyone I knew in my life because no one would call me back nationally because they couldn't pronounce my name, and I really did that, which is still, as far as I know, an all-time U.S. Senate record. Yeah, I'm not going to reveal that. One of the ways I've kept good relations with the ex-boyfriends is by not revealing such a thing. But someone on the plane did say, you got that from 17 ex-boyfriends. I go, no, it wasn't that many. Some of them, one of them did quite well. So anyway, but the point of the story is that outside money has been incredibly negative for our politics. It means that candidates can't control their own message. It means that so that you're not responsible for all those mean things that are run. And so that's one thing that we should do. And I think if we win big, I want you to picture this. In really conservative districts in Minnesota, one that a Democrat won last time, congressional, she was running ads of people standing on bales of hay trying to talk. And they couldn't talk. And the message of the ad was outside interests are blocking your ability to talk. She ran that ad for a district that had been long held by Republicans, and she won. And so I think that this is something where we have to get out of our Democratic shell and really reach out in a libertarian way to people when it comes to the outside money and the outside pharma money and the outside oil money and all of the things that are influencing our politics when we have 2 pharmaceutical lobbyists for every member of Congress. So that's a piece of it. The other thing about it is just getting people to want to believe again in our politics. Every single day, Donald Trump tries to make you hate government. He does, and we've got to actually call him on it. He's trying to make you not vote and just hate everyone. And he's trying to, bring in these, as you know, which is what the impeachment proceeding is about, is actually trying to get foreign powers to try to influence our elections, give them dirt on a political opponent, or what we now know Russia has done. This isn't made up stuff. Just watch Fiona Hill's testimony. Watch Ambassador Yovanovitch. This is happening in real time right now. And sometimes truth is stranger than fiction. That's where we are right now. And so I think our citizens have always been a mavericky group. And when they figure out what he has been doing, and many of them have now, they're going to stand up and say, no, this is my country. It's not yours, and you're not going to ruin it for us. All right? So sign up with us. We are going up. We are positive, and we're going to win this thing, but only with all of you. Only with all of you at our side. That is the only way I'm going to win this. So join us. Sign up at amyklobuchar.com. Talk to Scott, our great state director, and let's win this. Thank you, everybody.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.